Well, if you want to see the windier side of a New England winter, Jay's Geek House is the place to be. Nevertheless, we press on.
The wacky world of MultimediaJay.
It's probably a good thing that I did a critical BIOS update on this thing to improve stability last night before the windstorm started. So, yeah, Monolith is over at the project area for a change, and I've got a new BIOS running on it. And I also modified some power saving settings so that when this thing is up and running and it's not doing anything fancy, it goes all the way down to 30 watts very, very quickly. Which is one of the big reasons why I sprung for this, even though Ryzen was on the way. Because the old AMD system I had with the Phenom 2 couldn't go below 100 watts unless you really, really tried. This thing ratchets all the way down to 30, and I think one of the few reasons it doesn't approach the Delosaurus in terms of wattage is probably because it has more drives. So one of the things that I dislike about Monolith's setup is that it's a dust sucker case that's sitting on the floor. Granted, it does have a dust filter that'll come out the front, unlike a lot of competing cases, including some Rosewill knockoffs that copied the Define R5's design these days. But yeah, you can pull the dust filter off and clean it off and stuff like that, but I don't want to be relying on a dust filter when stuff like this exists to get the system further off the floor. So we're going to hook one of these up, and of course, I made a lot of jokes about the packaging of this in a quick O-Flick. If you want to see the jokes, go watch that. Not every quick O-Flick is going to be part of the next episode or an encore from a previous episode. So I want to have some concentrated coolness and reasons for people to actually watch that series instead of, oh, it's just killer clips from all the big videos. So just some things to keep in mind with what I put in what series on this channel these days. So, metal CPU stand, the classic gaff where people refer to the entire tower of a desktop computer setup as the CPU. But, what can I say? I don't really care who the target market is for these things. I just want that thing off the floor. So let's get this thing out of the box and see what we have to play with. So, as one could guess from something like this, we have a bunch of pieces of metal, some hardware, some felt, obviously, so you don't scratch your computer case. What we don't have is any kind of directions. Well then, challenge to wing it and be successful accepted. We'll go by the picture here. Okay, the wheels are on, thanks to this wimpy doodle little wrench here. You know, I've had some folks that are into more mechanical stuff over the years talk about wrenching on stuff. Oh yeah, I was wrenching on my car last weekend. I was wrenching on my truck. I was wrenching on my Jeep. I was wrenching on my computer stand. Hey, it's a start. It looks like some kiddie toy from My First Tool Set or something like that, but it gets the job done. Though I really think I should probably go over some of those nuts with a real wrench to get them a bit more secure. Okay, that works. I at least put the two casters with the brakes on them on the same side, so that way we can just roll the machine in and then lock everything in place. It's an interesting setup. You got these rubberish things that press up against the bottom and sides of the case to try not to scratch the metal. The issue here is these screws and whatnot. I'm tempted to get some more of this material and install it so that it doesn't scratch up the bottom of the case. I'm also curious how this design will work with the Define R5, which has that dust filter. I still want to be able to pull the dust filter out from the front, even when this thing is on one of these. And I got a feeling I'm going to have to install some extra material in order to make that happen that lifts the case above this in order to get that to work properly. First we got to get the width correct though, and when we do that we'll lock everything into place and start making plans on what to do with the additional material. No, this just doesn't cut it. So yeah, it technically works, but the metal is already starting to bow from the weight of the case, and the dust filter doesn't budge, because the dust filter basically is the bottom of the case. So in order for this to work, we have to find a way to incorporate the feet somehow, whether it's putting a board in this thing or something along those lines, or just something so that this thing isn't just plunked in here like this. Plus the metal's already bowing from the weight of the case. Whatever.
Epic fail.
This'll work if I really want to go to all the trouble. This is one of the shelves from my media shelves that I have games and movies on, and it's just the right size so that the feet can go on either end of it. we just take two of those, put them side by side, put them in the clamp on the CPU stand or whatever, and then just put the computer on top of that until I order something that's maybe non-combustible, like metal or something sturdier to go in that spot in order to complete this setup. So we'll see how it works. I'm really not too fond of this whole thing to begin with, so let's get some shelves together and just try the mock-up for now. Okay, this technically works, but I don't like it. I think it's too much work for too little results, and I think it's too many potential headaches for too little results. So first off, we know that the casters are bowing already, particularly if you do this with them. You really start to wonder when these are going to fall apart or break or something. So we have to keep them in line in order for this to even somewhat work, and even then it's questionable. This sort of thing would be good for putting the Delosaurus on wheels, but my main systems just have too much heft to them to make something like this practical, especially with those kinds of casters. I can tighten the bolts, I can tighten the nuts and bolts as much as I want, but I really think we're just waiting for this thing to break if we continue trying to use this thing with Monolith. Plus, because of the whole dust filter thing and putting some wood in there for the feet to rest upon, we've basically created a shelving unit. So if we're going to go to this kind of trouble, why not just buy some shelves that are the right dimensions to turn sideways and toss this thing into instead? It would certainly be a lot more practical, and I think even price-wise it would work out a little bit better. So, no, I've seen computers getting rolled around on these things before, but Monolith is not one of those computers that should be rolled around on something like this. Alright, back to the drawing board. So the clamp stand didn't work out, at least not for Monolith. I'm going to hold on to it though, because I think I might have a use for it later on. One of the ideas that I'm tossing around for later on, notably later, to the tune of maybe at least months, if not years, is to have some kind of low-power file server to put all my extra drives in, and until they seize up and they're no good, and just back them up and use RAID and other stuff like that, to use up all the mechanical drives that I may have sitting around, or just have cheap storage available that I can shut off when I don't need to use the storage. Of course, Monolith has two drives that serve as a small array, but I'm actually looking for a way to back things up via something that's not turned on all the time, and other things like that. So something resembling a low-power file server is something that I want to build at some point, and I think that would be a good thing to put on wheels and use the clamp stand for that sort of thing. In terms of Monolith, I'm actually wondering if I should end up using the Skylake board whenever I upgrade away from Skylake, which could be sooner than we think here, because, as we've seen, AMD has been really getting aggressive with Ryzen. And as a side effect of that, Intel is just looking embarrassing nowadays. Embarrassingly fragmented is the term I'm thinking of when it comes to this system specifically. Unfortunately, even something like socket LGA 1151 has been fragmented by Intel because of the various ways they've tried to keep up with Ryzen over the last couple of years. So there are actually two versions of LGA 1151 that are not compatible with each other. So this Skylake board can only go up to Kaby Lake, and I have to look for that generation of motherboards if I wanted to upgrade the Skylake to a newer motherboard. So once again, I get snagged by some kind of gotcha, but this time from Intel's side of things, because things are too fragmented. So socket AM4 and Ryzen is definitely in my future. And when specifically? After the Ryzen 4000's launch. When 4th generation launches, we're talking about years of processors that are running off of the same socket AM4. So as we've seen, as new Ryzen chips come out and they take over the show from their predecessors, the predecessors go on sale. Now the interesting thing about the 3rd gen Ryzen is that the Ryzen 7 3700X is actually a 65 watt processor, which would get me away from the 95 watts of this Skylake chip. So extremely versatile in terms of desktop, gaming, and workstation server type things because of its number of cores. 8 cores, 16 threads, 65 watts. Sounds like an amazing chip to base Monolith off of at some point later on, especially with the longevity and the commitment that AMD has shown to socket AM4. So that's totally looking like something I should do. And that's what I'm going to end up doing eventually, and the question is what to do with the Skylake board. I think the Skylake board would be good as the file server and whatnot, especially when right now it's at 50-something watts, but I've had this thing plugged into the kilowatt while it's been over here in the project area, and I've seen it go down to 30 watts when it wasn't doing anything fancy. So in terms of low wattage stuff, I actually think the Skylake still performs pretty well. I'm just curious how much lower those numbers get if we go back to integrated graphics on this thing. Okay, integrated graphics. See what kind of numbers we get. Oh, the light's dimmed. That's not a good thing. We have signal. American Megatrends, baby. Woohoo! Okay, this is just plain silly. Now I'm seeing regular 20s without the graphics card. Is it really worth it to have the graphics card throttle all the way down to just being a couple of watts? Ay. I think if I'm going to go forward with that file server idea, it should probably be with something custom built to be low power across the board. Just for fun though, if the lights don't get knocked out, let's run user benchmark with no graphics card. I think I can. Well, the integrated graphics are managing to pull something decent for frame rate. And by decent, I mean chuggy Nintendo 64 frame rates. Come on, integrated graphics. And this is with the usual power save features turned on that I usually use. Oh, just missed it. But it was at 22 frames per second, so nothing exciting. Is that it? When does it get into, like, the sequential read? Oh, here we go. Let's get this one at least. Pseudo slideshow. Here's the sustained rights. Now we can just say whatever. Surfboard, battleship, yacht. 6.65% is a very low 3D score. RTX 2060S is 100%. This GPU can only handle very basic 3D games, but it's fine for general computing tasks. Integrated graphics, baby. Gotta love it. Ladies and gentlemen, Forza Horizon 4 with no graphics card, 20 frames per second on the integrated graphics. Oh man. Video please. The Forza folks say that if you turn on the motion blur and crank that all the way up, then it won't look as bad at a lower frame rate. I suppose that's somewhat right, but no. Let's quit messing with this. Let's quit messing with the computer and put the graphics card back in. First person view, baby. That doesn't make it much better. Stop. Alright, this is stupid. Let's put the computer back together.
Epic fail.
Well, it is now the following evening, and after a slight delay because the XFL became a thing again, it is now game time, or should I say, gaming time, or close to it anyways, as I found the plugin drive that I was looking for to transfer some key gaming files over so that everything doesn't have to re-download on all these various computers. So we're going to get a couple of games and benchmarks ready to go for these systems, and then see how they all hold up in today's 2020 gaming environment. Till next time, this is MultimediaJay, signing off. Thanks for stopping by.